In this lesson, we'll learn how to clone out certain parts of a photo using the Clone Stamp tool. So this is a photo that we've already used in a couple of lessons in this course. Towards the latter part of our lesson using the healing brush, we learned how we could remove those swooping power lines that we have up there in the sky. And then on our lesson using Content Aware Fill, we learned how we could remove that power line tower there in the background. Now, if we zoom in here, hitting Control equals on our keyboard, there's a couple of additional background elements that I find a bit distracting. Another power line tower back there, as well as this light pole right here, or phone pole, or whatever that might be. I'd like to remove both of those, okay? Now, you could try using a couple of healing tools we've already covered. You could try using the spot healing brush, which again, you're just painting a selection, and then Photoshop is sampling from around that selection to weave in new pixel information to try and preserve tonal and color information. And that worked okay, but you can still see it doesn't look great, so I probably wouldn't try to use that. The healing brush, just to recap, gives you more control in that you can dictate where you source from, okay, while still trying to preserve basically texture, transparency, tonal, and color information, okay? So again, might not give you the best result possible. Now, the Clone Stamp tool works different in that it's just doing a direct copy of wherever you source from. So what I'd like to do really quickly is let's create a new layer to use the Clone Stamp on. If you look up here in the Options panel, you see where it says Sample. I want to have that set to all layers. This is pretty much what you've already seen with some of our other healing tools. But you could also set it to just work on the current layer or the current layer and then all layers that are visible below that layer. But generally, I like all layers, okay? And we've already talked about align. This is something we demonstrated with our healing brush, where you can align the source, okay, that you're sampling from with the cursor or with the brush itself. So we cover that in our lesson 3 with the healing brush. So check that out if you haven't watched it already, if you want to kind of start to understand how that works. So I would probably want to have that for the Clone Stamp if I'm going to kind of be cloning my way up here. Okay, so you can see how that kind of works. Now, Clone Stamp works really nicely when you run into edges. We have the edge of the grass line here and the tree line. The Clone Stamp works much better with situations like that than the healing brush, for example. Okay. Now, right now, you can just right-click. You can choose any brush you want out of your brush preset picker. Okay, even if it's a custom brush you've made. In this case, I'm just using a hard round brush. Okay. And so you can see how we can just kind of clone right across. Now, in this case, I'm continuing to resample kind of as I go, even though I got the source point aligned with my brush. Okay, but you can see just kind of how nicely that works. And I like using the Clone Stamp for little fine knit areas like this. Now, we're using a hard round brush again. You could come into your brush panel. You could turn on, say, transfer, and if you wanted to turn on pen pressure for both opacity and flow, to kind of dictate that if you're using a stylus. And so if you just want to kind of to use that to kind of for some better blending, you could, okay, for your hard round brush. Or you could switch to a soft round brush. We kind of got a lot of organic elements from these tree branches back there. I might try that instead. Again, turning on transfer. And that'll just kind of help me start to kind of weave some of that information in there. The Clone Stamp, you have more control than anything, okay? Because you can really dictate the type of brush that you want to use. You're able to dictate where you're sourcing from and really kind of how you blend that information in. It's a very powerful tool, whereas the healing brush and spot healing brush are trying to kind of take care of a few things automatically for you, just in each in their kind of own way. Okay, but as I kind of start to work this in, I'm using kind of a soft round brush in this case, just because everything's kind of a little bit more out of focus back here. So that's kind of my reasoning behind that. But already that's starting to look pretty nice. You just got to be really careful about not getting a repeated a repeated pattern that starts to occur. Okay, so I'll kind of continue on up here, kind of cloning out this power line tower. Now, as I do that, I'd like to take the opportunity to talk to you about the clone source panel, which is right here. Look for this little icon. If you don't see it, come up to Window, and then you can choose Clone Source, and it'll jump right up. Now, there's a lot of different options in here. I'm not going to get too heavy into them. I just mainly want to kind of talk to you about how you can have different clone sources saved. So by default, you'll have this first one here, and if I kind of hover around, you can see that it's sourcing from where I sampled or up here in the sky. I can choose another one of these to select it, and let's say I source from, let's say I just source down here in the grass somewhere, okay? So you can see if I hover around, you can see the preview of where it's sourcing from, but if I jump back to this other source and move around, you can see it's remembering that clone source. So you can have up to 5 here, and so you might find that handy if you got a lot of specific areas you're focusing on. You may want to jump to a specific source if you feel that that is the case that you need to do. Now, if you don't like having that little preview, you can just uncheck Overlay and you won't see that. But I love having that. That really does help me out quite a bit. Now, we'll go ahead and kind of continue up here. I'm going to kind of continue just kind of cloning out this tower. And again, you know, for something like this, I'll find myself kind of resampling. We got a little kind of a hairy area down here. So I might kind of want to sample there. And what's really cool, let's zoom in here just a little bit more, is we got this option right here. And this basically can allow you to flip whatever you're cloning horizontally or vertically. So that could come in really handy, especially if we get down here and we're starting to kind of clone some of these other elements and we don't want it to look like they're perfectly repeated. So like take, let's try this. Let's sample kind of that area right there. See how it's an exact copy? Well, if I flip that horizontally, see how it's reversed? And so I could probably kind of bring that over there, and I could do the same thing, just kind of mixing it up, kind of changing up that horizon line there to where it's not obvious that it's a repeated element. You can do the same thing vertically as well. Now you can also rotate your clone source. So I'll go ahead and sample that there. And you can kind of rotate it like so, and you can kind of see how, we'll do that a little bit more extremely, you can see how that source is rotating. Let's do that even more. So it's rotated differently from what we had there, and I could kind of start to bring that in as well. We'll try another spot up here just to make that more clear. See how when I sample that, it's already rotated based off of the value I have right there. And you could keep doing that more and more, okay? So even if I sampled right here, you can see how it's automatically rotating based off of the value that I have here. Of course, if you want to reset it, you can just hit 0. If I were to sample again from right there, you can see how it's very consistent. So you have a lot of control as far as kind of cloning over some of these different little areas here to really kind of remove something and just make it feel very seamless. Okay. So kind of zooming out there, that feels very nice. Go ahead and hide our clone source panel there. And just toggling all those edits we made on that layer, you can kind of see the difference there. And so that worked out really nicely, especially since they're really far away. We've now taken this entire image and just made it look a lot more serene and peaceful, peaceful image of nature, as opposed to really what we had to begin with. So that's how you can use the clone stamp to really get in there and clone out any unwanted elements of an image.